welcome to the Soil and Roots podcast, journeying together into deep discipleship. I'm Brian Fisher, and this is episode 9, I Saw the Sign. For those of you who are fans of practical application, your day has arrived. We've taken some time to lay out some of the foundations of Soil and Roots, and today we're going to introduce some very practical next steps in our journey into deep discipleship. So here's some of what we've explored so far. The problem. Modern Christianity talks a whole lot about making disciples, but struggles to actually do it. The disciple is someone who is journeying to become more like Jesus. But let's face it, that doesn't seem to be the definition of discipleship in our current era. Dallas Willard referred to this as the Great Omission. We've also explored the Great Omission from another angle. It's the absence of the later stages of our discipleship journey, based on an outline from the book The Critical Journey. The modern church is pretty good about guiding us through the first 3 stages, meeting God, learning about God, and a productive life. But once we hit a wall of some sort, however, most Christian institutions aren't sure what to do. So the last 3 stages, the journey inward, the journey outward, and a life of love, are typically missing from our modern Christian experience. Point is, we're in a discipleship crisis, something on which most Christian leaders and thinkers completely agree. The impact of this crisis can be seen at all levels of human experience and in all 4 of our relationships with God and others and ourselves and creation and culture. We're not going to be looking at the impact of the Great Omission on culture for a while, but as individuals, we often feel the impact. We have this nagging sense of disconnection from God, others, ourselves. In our quiet moments, or perhaps in the middle of a crisis, we wonder if there's supposed to be more to the Christian life than what we're actually living. At Soil and Roots, we're exploring the solution to this crisis, and we call it deep discipleship. Deep discipleship isn't so much about our external belief statements and various acts of service. It's about an inward journey into the human heart, below our belief statements, below our polite behaviors and attitudes at church, and into the realm of our soils, into the realm of the hidden and unconscious ideas that form us, form our families, and even our culture. At the bedrock of who we are, our hearts, our spirits, we find these ideas and the desires with which they're fused. The exploration into our hearts and the hearts of those around us at this level is the deep end of discipleship. It's what's been omitted from our Christian experience. It's venturing in to stages 4, 5, and 6 of the critical journey. It takes a while to get our minds and hearts and arms around these strange hidden assumptions we call ideas, so this season we've introduced a few idea categories and some specific examples. We'll cover a few more before we end the season. Last episode, we dug into the anatomy of these powerful ideas. We talked about their origin, their location, their formation, and how we usually become aware of them. We're discovering that many of our ideas are formed through ways we normally associate with modern Christianity, the Bible, sermons, fellowship with others. Though these ideas are also formed through other ways we don't pay as much attention to in our era. Our family of origin, the neighborhoods and communities in which we were raised, primary relationships and experiences we had when we were younger. In other words, our story. Our story, our history, has an enormous impact on our discipleship journey. Sometimes we need to go backward to go forward. Unfortunately, most of us don't look into our hearts until our story gets interrupted. When we hit the wall, some sort of crisis in life, a job loss, a death in the family, an illness, an accident, a betrayal, even a theological crisis. Or we have deep wounds in our hearts that have been there for years and the metaphorical dam finally bursts for some reason. When we hit the wall, we have a choice. Continue to add on more coping strategies or surrender. Generally speaking, it's only when we surrender and step into the grief and the pain and the anxiety and the loss that we begin to truly unravel the ideas in our hearts. So as we head into the last group of episodes in Season 1, it's now important for us to explore a very, very important question. If these ideas have so much power, if they're generally hidden and unconscious, if many of us aren't really aware of them even in normal Christian circles, and if they're central to our journey to becoming more like Jesus, can we even figure out what they are? Doesn't Jeremiah tell us our hearts are desperately sick and wicked? Is it even possible to probe the bedrock of our soils in order to determine what sort of ideas are truly governing us? Well, the great news is yes, it is possible to explore and uncover the ideas in our soils. In fact, This is what Jesus invites us to do. And he's already wired each of us with external markers that give us hints and clues about what's going on internally. So consider this episode a little preview of Season 2. We're introducing this next step here to give us something to look forward to, something to be very hopeful for as we continue excavating the great omission in the world of ideas in our journey into deep discipleship. So it's time for a few new terms. The first one is the 8 indicators. These are the signposts that every human being has, every person exhibits, that point back down to the ideas, the experienced realities in our hearts. And these are all very practical, very normal things that are common to everyone. By paying attention to and exploring these 8 indicators, we can get a pretty good picture of what's going on down in our hearts, if we're courageous enough to explore them with God and a trusted friend. So here are our 8 indicators: our thoughts, our emotions, our health, our behaviors, our relationships, our words, and how we use time and money. I'll say them again: our thoughts, our emotions, our health, our behaviors, our relationships, our words, and how we use time and money. So when we explore these indicators, we can begin to frame a picture of the actual ideas in our hearts. Once we have a clearer view of the ideas in our hearts, we can then determine whether our ideas bend towards darkness or they bend towards the kingdom of light. Exploring and understanding these indicators is really vital as we journey into deep discipleship. That's why we'll spend all of Season 2 walking through each one of them. So, we need a new term. What should we call this exploration of our 8 indicators with God and a trusted friend to help us uncover the hidden ideas in our hearts? Someone recently asked me if this podcast is about worldview. If you aren't familiar with the term worldview, it basically means a set of beliefs that help us understand the world. Worldview has become a big deal in the last few decades, and it's a wonderful field of study. Part of my recent education has been in Christian worldview studies with the Colson Center in Washington, D.C. through their fellows program. I highly recommend it. Worldview works to answer some key questions, such as where did we come from? What's wrong with the world? How do we fix it? What's a human being? What is truth? You'll notice some similarities between these key worldview questions and some of the core ideas we've introduced here. Though if you've been listening really carefully, you'll notice that I actually rarely use the word belief. We talk about ideas and deep discipleship and desires, but I intentionally use the word belief pretty sparingly and selectively. Not because of what the word actually means, but because of what our culture typically assumes it means. When we say that worldview refers to a set of beliefs, what many people mean is a set of mental assumptions or conclusions. The word belief tends to describe something our minds agree with. I'm not saying that our mental beliefs never permeate our hearts. Our minds are essential to heart formation and they work together. We all have sincerely held beliefs, and often our hearts do embrace what our minds believe, but not all the time. Many of us experience a disconnection between the ideas our hearts embrace and what our minds say they believe. In this sense, our minds and our hearts are not integrated. They're not on the same page. We are disintegrated. Now, in fairness, there's only been one man who ever walked the planet who is completely integrated, where his mind, heart, body, and soul are all in complete unity all the time and completely in sync with the ideas of the kingdom of God, and we aren't him. But another way to think of a deep disciple is someone who is becoming more and more integrated, someone whose ideas of light in their heart sync with their intellectual belief. We see evidence of disintegration all the time in ourselves and in others. The politician who rails against government spending during his campaign, but increases the budget as soon as he gets into office. We might claim he's a liar, but sometimes the politician mentally believes in his policies until his heart desires something else, perhaps money or power. Jessica and I recently became aware of a man who's leaving his wife because he no longer loves her. Well, it's not what he said on his wedding day. His head believed an idea of love when he got married, but his heart's desires aren't in step with what his mind believes. His heart is embracing ideas of love from the kingdom of darkness, though he believed with his head and confessed with his mouth something very different on his wedding day. There's nothing wrong with the word belief, though I think we could probably define it better in today's rationalistic culture. I'm just cautious because we often say we believe something and we think we do, but our hearts are rooted in different ideas. Now, we typically chalk this disintegration up to sin, but you've probably guessed I find that to be a surface answer that stops short of deep discipleship. Of course we sin. The question is why? Why the disconnect between our stated beliefs and the ideas in our hearts? So, is Soil and Roots a podcast about belief and worldview? I don't think so. There is some overlap, but worldview tends to be concerned with evaluating the various belief systems in church and culture. Worldview doesn't normally deal with the individual heart or story or deeply embedded ideas. So let's use a different word to describe how we discern the ideas in our soils. It isn't worldview, it's heart view. Heart view, exploring our 8 indicators as signposts to point us back to the deeply embedded ideas and desires in our hearts. Heart view is a crucial habit of anyone venturing into deep discipleship. It's probably obvious, but I'm not really a marketing and branding person. Heart view isn't even a real word, but it's simple, and it works as a complement of sorts to worldview. Worldview is about our set of beliefs, and heart view is concerned with the ideas and desires that often sit beneath our beliefs. Heart view is never something we should do by ourselves. It's best to explore these 8 indicators with God and a trusted friend or two. We'll struggle to get an accurate picture of our desires and ideas on our own. We really aren't even designed to do that. Our hearts are complicated, and we tend to be really, really good liars, especially to ourselves. Most of us employ coping mechanisms that obscure our hearts, and many of those mechanisms have been in place since we were kids. Our hearts tend to stack layer after layer of assumptions and patterns and habits that make digging into our soils pretty difficult. So we need a trusted spouse or a mentor or a friend or some other wise, discerning person to come alongside us as we wrestle with our hearts in cooperation with the Holy Spirit. Trust is a pivotal word when it comes to heart view. Adam Young is the host of a podcast called The Place We Find Ourselves, and he shares that there are 3 types of people in the world: garden variety sinners, wicked people, and evil people. This ongoing process of discerning our hearts should only be done with people who legitimately love us, meaning they genuinely seek our goodness. Wicked and evil people don't do that. And there are plenty of wicked and evil people sitting in our churches and Christian communities, so we need to exercise some caution here. We'll unpack these more in Season 2, but here's a brief introduction to each of the 8 indicators so that we begin to get familiar with them. So first is thoughts. Human beings are amazing, and one of the things that make us amazing is the fact that we can think about what we think about, what scientists and sociologists call metacognition. We have the ability to not only think, but to assess what we think. In the Gospel of Mark, Jesus talks about the relationship of the heart to the rest of us, and he notes that thoughts and the heart are related. Quote, and he was saying, that which proceeds out of the man, that is what defiles the man. For from within, out of the heart of men, proceed the evil thoughts and fornications, thefts, murders, adulteries, deeds of coveting and wickedness, as well as deceit, sensuality, envy, slander, pride, and foolishness. All these evil things proceed from within and defile the man. There's a fairly famous verse in Proverbs 23 that, although not always used in context, gives us some more insight. Quote, do not eat the bread of a selfish man or desire his delicacies, for as he thinks within himself, so he is. He says to you, eat and drink, but his heart is not with you. So our thoughts and our hearts are tied deeply together. Because God has given us the ability to think about what we think about, we can dig into our hearts by studying our thought patterns. And we can evaluate if our thought patterns line up with ideas of dark or ideas of light. Number 2, emotions. It seems that we tend to take one of 2 perspectives when it comes to emotions. Feelings are either bad and we need to control and suppress them, or feelings are everything and we owe it to ourselves to follow and fulfill every emotion. But Chris Dodd wrote, quote, feelings help us name what we are experiencing in our hearts. Feelings bring us to confession of how wonderfully frightening it is to live the mystery of being with God and others, end quote. As indicators, emotions are extremely important. The heart often reveals its true desires through our emotions, perhaps through anger, fear, anxiety, or joy, compassion, gladness. Okay, number 3 is health. There's a passage in Proverbs that says, do not be wise in your own eyes. Fear the Lord and turn away from evil. It will be healing to your body and refreshment to your bones. Let's recall an idea of anthropology that we've explored. We are integrated people. Our hearts, minds, and bodies are woven together in the context of our soul. So it stands to reason that our health may point us back to our hearts. Does that mean that every injury or illness is a spiritual sign? No, however, that doesn't mean our bodies are divorced from the rest of us. Constant fatigue, some chronic illnesses, depression, loss of energy, those may all be signs of a distressed heart. On the flip side, vibrancy, energy, and overall vitality may be signs of a well-rested soul. Number 4, actions. Our behaviors tie back to the desires and ideas in our hearts. How we respond in peaceful situations and how we respond in crisis. How we deal with the everyday mundane and how we deal with the extraordinary. Do we behave in these situations the way Jesus behaved? If not, why not? Our 5th indicator is relationships. Proverbs 13:20 says, "He who walks with wise men will be wise, but the companion of fools will suffer harm." If you're like me, you've had at least once or twice been the companion of fools and have probably suffered for it. Back to Adam Young, his work on studying these 3 types of people, garden variety sinners, wicked people, and evil people, is helpful here. A wicked person is someone who is unwilling or unable to repent. They may say they're sorry and they may even act contrite, but they're just not repentant. They go to great lengths to look good, but their hearts are not with you. And the evil person is a wicked person who intentionally seeks to harm you. So Jesus dealt with these 3 types of people differently, and so should we. If we're going to grow to be like Jesus, we should learn to recognize these 3 different groups and how to relate to them. Evaluating how we relate to different people, what we desire from them, how we let them impact us, are all very important signposts that help us understand the ideas in our hearts. So our 6th indicator is words. Matthew 15 echoes the passage we just read in Mark, and many Christians know that what we speak reflects our hearts. But this doesn't just relate to what we say, but also how we say it and to whom. Words may be one of the easiest indicators to evaluate. Just ask your spouse or close friend whether what you say and how you say it reminds them of how Jesus spoke to his closest friends. Ouch. But it's also one of the least reliable indicators. Talk really can be cheap. Our culture tends to place great importance on the spoken word, but we'll be exploring why words can't be a reliable indicator by itself. Number 7, time. We invest in time in what or whom we love. Where and when we spend our time tells us a ton about the desires and ideas in our hearts. And the last indicator is money. There are over 500 verses in the Bible about prayer. There are over 2,000 verses that mention money. I used to teach biblical financial stewardship to couples and families, and I taught that how we treat our money is the primary indicator of our spiritual maturity. As I've studied the concept of ideas, guess what? How we treat our money is a great signpost, pointing back to the desires and the ideas and the bedrock of our soils. In fact, we can generally gauge our discipleship journey more by evaluating how we use money than by how many church services or Bible studies we attend. So there they are, the 8 Heartview indicators. Our thoughts, our emotions, our health, our actions, our relationships, our words, and how we use time and money. If we have a desire to dive into deep discipleship, practicing Heartview with God and a trusted friend is invaluable as we seek to understand what's actually going on with the ideas that power us. That's just a little taste of what's coming up in just a few episodes. Hey, thanks for listening. If you'd like more information on the work of Soil and Roots, check out the website at soilandroots.org. You can join our email list there, and we invite you to join the community of folks who financially support us as well. If you have any questions or you have anything you want to discuss further, feel free to email us at fish@soilandroots.org, and we'll see you next time.